The human scream ripped through the Gamelon streets as the aliens ripped the pet dog apart, limb from bloody limb. His name was Maximus, my best friend, you alien bastards. Xyla paced in front of Pryla, boots scuffing the floor of the ornate office. What were they thinking? The humans are rampaging mad. They burned outposts, smashed colonies, now raced toward Gamelon Prime. Pryla reclined behind the desk, staring through the window over the sprawl below. We saw them weak, easy to rule. Wrong we were. Xyla halted paces, looking straight at his peer. But why? What fuels this? Many worlds failed to resist like this. Pryla steepled his fingers, leaning back. Remember Raymond Gray, the human peace ambassador. He came with delegates and a dog pet that followed him, a furry beast with 4 legs. But we executed the creature as an affront, a test of humanity's will, a terrible mistake. If we do not stop them here at Gamelon Prime, the humans will destroy our entire empire as payback. Pryla leaned back in his chair, staring out the window again. We should have known. When the humans first made contact, we saw their world, not unified under a single government, but a patchwork of nations, some constantly warring with each other. We thought this chaos made them weak. Xyla scoffed. Just like the Krillians. Remember how they fought among themselves until we conquered them? Pryla nodded, but we didn't pay attention to the details. The humans, for all their conflicts, would put aside their differences and rally together when faced with an outside threat. It's ingrained in their history. So what you're saying is, Xylar said slowly, by killing the human's pet we became that outside threat. Precisely. Pryla turned to face his peer. Kyler's actions, though small in scale, represented a much larger offense to the humans. It wasn't just about the dog, but what it symbolized, an attack on one of their own, unprovoked and unjustified. Xyla shook his head in disbelief. And now they're united against us, all because of one impulsive act. It was the spark that ignited the fire, Pryla said grimly. The humans may fight amongst themselves, but threaten one of them, and you face the wrath of their entire species. We've seen it in their history, and now we're seeing it firsthand. Xyla leaned back in his chair, a look of concern spreading across his face. So what did the humans do after that? How did they respond to such a blatant provocation? Pryla let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the memory. At first there was only silence. Gray and his team stood there, frozen in shock and disbelief, their eyes fixed on the lifeless body of their beloved companion. The air was thick with tension, and for a moment we thought that would be the end of it. He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. We offered them insincere apologies, empty words that we thought would placate them, just as they had with so many other races before. We expected them to accept our hollow condolences, to bow their heads and move on, as was the way of things in the Gamelon Empire. Pryla's expression hardened, his eyes growing distant as he recalled the moment that changed everything. But the humans, they did something we never could have anticipated, something that shook us to our very core. Xyla leaned forward, his interest piqued. What was it? What did they do? Gray looked up at Kyler, and in his eyes there was no trace of fear or submission. Instead, they burned with a rage so intense, so unfathomable, that it seemed to consume him from within. He spoke a single sentence, his voice low and steady, but filled with a power that still haunts me to this day. Xyla's eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat. What did he say? Pryla met his gaze, his words heavy with the weight of their significance. He said, "You have no idea what you've just done." And then, without another word, the humans gathered the broken body of their fallen companion and left. They boarded their ship and departed, leaving us to believe that we had emerged victorious, that we had put them in their place. A mirthless chuckle escaped Pryla's lips as he shook his head. We were so ignorant, so blinded by our own arrogance. We had no idea of the storm that was coming, the fury that we had unleashed upon ourselves. In that moment we sealed our own fate, and the fate of the entire Gamelon Empire. Xyla stared at Pryla in disbelief, his mind reeling from the revelation. A statue of the dog they called Buddy? His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking the words too loudly might summon the humans' wrath upon them once more. Pryler nodded solemnly, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon visible through the window. Yes, a monument to their fallen companion, a symbol of their unwavering resolve. He turned to face Xylar, his expression grave. And it didn't stop there. As our forces moved to engage the humans, we found more of these statues, each one standing as a silent sentinel amidst the ruins of our outposts. Xylar's brow furrowed as he tried to make sense of the humans' actions. But why? Why go to such lengths for a mere pet? Pryler leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Don't you see, Xylar? It was never about the dog itself, it was about what it represented to them. By killing Buddy, we struck at the very heart of their values, their sense of loyalty and companionship. We underestimated the depth of their bond, and now we're paying the price. Xylar shook his head, a mixture of awe and fear playing across his features. I never imagined that a single act could unleash such fury, such relentless determination. Pryler chuckled mirthlessly. Neither did we, my friend. We thought we understood the humans, that we could control them as we had so many others. But we were wrong. They are unlike any species we've encountered before, and their capacity for vengeance knows no bounds. Xylar's eyes widened as a sudden realization struck him. The statues, the message, they're not just a reminder of what we did, are they? They're a warning, a promise of what's to come. Pryler nodded, his expression grim. Yes, a declaration of their intent. They will not rest until they have avenged their fallen comrade, until they have made us pay for our transgression. And with each outpost they destroy, each statue they erect, they move one step closer to their goal. Xylar slumped back in his chair, the weight of their situation bearing down upon him. What can we do, Pryler? How can we hope to stand against such an enemy? Pryler's eyes glinted with a mixture of resignation and determination. We fight, Xylar. We fight with everything we have, and we pray that it will be enough, for if we fail, if the humans reach Gamelon Prime... Xylar's eyes widened in shock, his mouth hanging agape. A transmission? From Grey himself? Pryler nodded solemnly, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Yes, his image appeared on every screen, every communication device across the Empire, and his words, they still echo in my mind. Leaning forward, Xylar asked, what did he say? Pryler closed his eyes, as if recalling a painful memory. He spoke of the bond between humans and their companions, how it went beyond mere ownership or servitude. He said that when we killed Buddy, we didn't just take a life, we shattered a piece of their very soul. Xylar swallowed hard, his hands trembling. And then? Grey's voice grew colder, more resolute, Pryler continued. He declared that the humans would not rest until they had dismantled our empire, piece by piece, just as we had torn apart their beloved friend. He vowed that they would erase every trace of our existence, leaving only the memory of our cruelty and arrogance as a warning to others. Xylar's face paled, his heart pounding in his chest. How could we have been so blind, so foolish? Pryler shook his head, a bitter smile playing on his lips. We underestimated them, Xylar. We thought their compassion made them weak, but it was the very source of their strength. And now, as our empire crumbles around us, we are paying the price for our hubris. Xylar leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. What can we do, Pryler? Is there any way to stop them? Pryler's eyes met Xylar's, a flicker of despair passing between them. I fear it may be too late. The humans have unleashed a fury unlike any we have ever known, and they will not stop until they have had their vengeance. All we can do now is brace ourselves for the storm to come and pray that something of our civilization survives. Xylar's gaze drifted to the window, where the distant glow of fires could be seen on the horizon. The weight of their actions, the consequences of their arrogance, hung heavy in the air. As the two Gamelons sat in silence, the sounds of distant explosions and the cries of their dying empire echoed through the night, a grim reminder of the price they had paid for underestimating the power of human loyalty and love. Xylar's eyes widened in disbelief as Pryla recounted the demands made by Raymond Gray. They wanted us to hand over Kyla, the guard responsible for killing their companion. Pryla nodded solemnly, his gaze fixed on the floor. Yes, they demanded justice for the heinous act committed against one of their own. It was a bold move, one that caught our leaders off guard. Leaning back in his chair, Xyla shook his head. But surely our leaders wouldn't give in to such a demand. To surrender one of our own to the humans would be seen as a sign of weakness. A bitter laugh escaped Pryla's lips. You're right, Xyla. Our leaders in their arrogance and pride refused to comply with the humans' ultimatum. They believed that we could still emerge victorious, that we could crush the humans and put them back in their place. Xyla's brow furrowed as he processed the information. So what happened next? Did the humans make good on their threat? Pryla sighed heavily, the weight of the memories bearing down upon him. They did, and more. The war continued, but it was unlike anything we had ever experienced before. The humans were relentless, striking at us from every angle with a fury and determination that left us reeling. Leaning forward, Xyla listened intently as Pryla continued. Their technology and tactics were far superior to our own. They seemed to anticipate our every move, countering our strategies with a precision that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Pryla shook his head, a look of resignation etched onto his features. We underestimated them, Xyla. We thought their compassion and loyalty made them weak, but it was the very source of their strength. In our arrogance, we failed to recognize the power of the bond they shared, not just with each other, but with their companions as well. Xyla sat in silence, his mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of their mistake. As the distant sounds of battle echoed through the night, he couldn't help but wonder if there was any hope left for their once mighty empire. Pryla's voice cut through the silence, his tone heavy with the weight of their reality. And now, as our cities burn and our armies fall, we are left to face the consequences of our actions. The humans will not rest until they have had their vengeance, and I fear that our empire may not survive the storm that is to come. Xyla leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Months? The war lasted for months. His voice trembled slightly, the weight of the revelation settling upon him like a heavy shroud. Pryla nodded solemnly, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon visible through the window. Yes, each day brought new reports of devastation and loss. Our fleets, once thought invincible, were shattered like fragile glass. Our armies, the pride of the Gamelon Empire, were decimated, their ranks thinned by the relentless onslaught of human firepower. He turned to face Xyla, his expression grim. We threw everything we had at them, every ship, every soldier, every weapon in our arsenal. But it was like fighting against the tide, against the very forces of nature itself. The humans were unstoppable, their resolve unbreakable. Pryla paused, his voice growing somber as he continued. In the end, it was Kyla himself who brought about the end of the war. The weight of his actions, the guilt of what he had done, had been eating away at him since the day he pulled the trigger. He could no longer bear the burden of knowing that his impulsive act had brought such ruin upon our people. Xyla's eyes widened in shock. He gave himself up just like that? The disbelief in his voice was palpable. The idea of a Gamelon surrendering to the enemy was almost unthinkable. Pryla nodded, his expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. Yes. In a final act of contrition, he broadcast a message across the empire, admitting his crime and expressing his deep remorse for the consequences it had wrought. He then boarded a small ship and set a course for the coordinates the humans had provided, knowing full well that he was likely going to his own execution. Pryla's voice grew distant, his eyes unfocused as if he were seeing the events unfold before him once more. We don't know what happened to him after that. The humans never said, never gloated over his fate, but as soon as he was in their custody, as soon as they had the one responsible for the death of their beloved companion, the attacks stopped. The human ships withdrew, leaving behind the smouldering ruins of our once mighty empire. Xyla sat back in his chair, stunned by the revelation. So it was over? Just like that? His voice was barely above a whisper, the enormity of the situation slowly sinking in. Pryler sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the truth. Yes and no. The war was over, the fighting had ceased, but the damage was done. Our empire, the very foundation of our society, was in shambles, its once proud people demoralized and broken. And the humans? They had shown the galaxy the true extent of their power and their resolve. They had demonstrated in no uncertain terms the lengths they would go to avenge one of their own, no matter how small or insignificant we might have thought them to be. Xyla's brow furrowed as he leaned forward, his eyes locked on Pryler. But what about the other races? Surely they must have taken notice of what happened. His voice was tinged with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Did they not offer aid or try to intervene? A bitter laugh escaped Pryler's lips, the sound harsh and grating in the stillness of the room. Aid? He shook his head, his expression darkening. No, they were too afraid. The humans had sent a clear message. They were not to be trifled with. No one wanted to risk incurring their wrath. Xyla sat back, his mind reeling from the implications of Pryler's words. The silence stretched between them, heavy and oppressive, as each grappled with the weight of the truth. After a long moment, Pryler's expression shifted, growing contemplative. But there was one thing that the other races did. His voice was low, almost a whisper. They started to whisper, to tell stories of the humans and their incredible feat. They spoke of how a single, seemingly insignificant act of cruelty had unleashed a force that had brought an empire to its knees. Xyla nodded, his eyes distant as he recalled the tales that had reached his own ears. I've heard some of those stories. They say that the humans are not to be underestimated, that they have a capacity for both great compassion and terrible vengeance. Pryler sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of centuries. Yes, and those stories have only grown over time. The humans have become a legend, a cautionary tale for any who would dare to cross them. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. They say that if you harm even one of their own, even a lowly pet, you risk the fury of an entire species. Xyla swallowed hard, the implications of Pryler's words sinking in like a lead weight in his gut. He had always known that the humans were a force to be reckoned with, but hearing the stories, the whispers that had spread like wildfire across the galaxy, made it all too real. And what of us? Xyla asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What will become of the Gamilon Empire now that we have felt the full weight of human vengeance? Pryler nods slowly, his eyes narrowing as he considers the tale. It seems the Zorkons learned a valuable lesson that day. The humans may be compassionate, but they are not to be underestimated or trifled with. Xyla leans back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. Indeed, it makes me wonder what other stories are out there, what other races have learned the hard way not to cross the humans. Pryler chuckles softly. I'm sure there are many. The humans have a way of leaving a lasting impression on those they encounter, for better or for worse. Xyla nods. And to think it all started with a single act of cruelty, a moment of arrogance that cost us everything. Pryler sighs, his gaze growing distant. Yes, if only we had known then what we know now, if only we had understood the true depth of human loyalty and the lengths they would go to defend it. Xyla leans forward, his voice low and serious. But we didn't. And now we must live with the consequences of our actions. Our empire is in ruins, our people scattered and broken, and the humans, they have risen to become one of the most powerful and respected races in the galaxy. Pryler nods, a position they have earned through blood and sacrifice, through their unwavering commitment to those they hold dear. Xyla sits back, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. And what of us? What is to become of the Gamilon Empire now? Pryler shakes his head. I don't know, Xyla, but one thing is certain: we must learn from our mistakes. We must understand that compassion and loyalty are not weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths to be respected and admired. Xyla nods, his expression grim. And we must never ever underestimate the humans again, for if we do, I fear that there will be no coming back from the consequences. Pryler sighs, his gaze returning to the window and the shattered remains of their once mighty empire. No, there will not. The humans have made that abundantly clear. And now we must find a way to rebuild, to forge a new path forward in a galaxy that has been forever changed by their presence. Xyla's brow furrows as he leans forward, his eyes locked on Pryla. Wait, you're saying the humans gave Kyla a choice, to be put on trial or to live as a pet? His voice is tinged with disbelief and curiosity. Pryla nods slowly, his gaze distant as he recalls the whispered rumors. That's what I heard. The humans, they wanted more than just retribution. They wanted Kyla to understand, to truly comprehend the depth of the bond he had so carelessly severed. Xyla shakes his head, trying to wrap his mind around the concept. But to live as a pet, to be cared for and loved by the very species he had wronged, that's unheard of, Pryla finishes, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. And yet so very human. They have a capacity for empathy and forgiveness that is both remarkable and terrifying. Leaning back in his chair, Xyla runs a hand over his face, his mind reeling from the implications. And no one knows which path Kyla chose, whether he faced trial or accepted the life of a pet. Pryla shrugs, his eyes meeting Xyla's. No. He disappeared, vanished into the depths of human society. Some say he chose the trial to face the consequences of his actions head-on. Others believe he took the path of the pet, to learn firsthand the love and devotion he had so callously disregarded. Silence settles between them, heavy with the weight of the story. Xyla's voice is soft, almost reverent as he speaks. In a way, it doesn't matter which he chose. The fact that the humans gave him that choice, that they wanted him to understand, rather than simply suffer, it says everything about who they are. Pryla nods, his expression thoughtful. The humans, they are a force unlike any other. Their strength lies not in their weapons or their technology, but in their capacity for love, for empathy, for growth. They took the darkest moment of our history and turned it into an opportunity for change, for understanding. Xyla's eyes widen as a sudden realization dawns on him. And that, Pryla, is why they will always be a power to be reckoned with, why their legacy will endure long after the scars of war have faded. Pryla leans forward, his voice low and intense. The galaxy will never forget what happened here, Xyla. The story of the humans and their unwavering devotion, their unbreakable spirit, will be told for generations to come. And Kyla, whether he faced justice or found redemption, will forever be a part of that story. The two aliens fall silent once more, each lost in their own thoughts as they contemplate the profound impact of a single species, a single event, on the fabric of the universe. The humans, once dismissed as weak and primitive, have proven themselves to be a force of nature, a beacon of hope and resilience in a galaxy too often consumed by darkness. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.